Hello everyone. If you've taken a yoga class before, you of course have done downward facing dog. Now, it can actually be a fairly difficult pose. And if you've done it before, you may think, wow, this is actually really pretty difficult or even miserable. And there's nothing more frustrating than when a yoga teacher says, well, downward facing dog is supposed to be a rest pose. And it is anything but a resting pose, especially if we're not doing it correctly, and especially if our hamstrings are a little bit tight, if our low back is a little bit tight. So in this video, I want to show you the modification that you can make that makes the pose so much more effective so that we can get the benefits of downward facing dog, which primarily is going to be weight bearing, bone density, muscle tone. It is a great pose for that. We want to make sure we're doing it correctly. By the way, thank you so much for liking and subscribing to my YouTube channel. It really helps me to bring you free content just like this. My website is StayAheadFitness.com. But let's go ahead and jump into the actual demonstration here. I want to go ahead and show this to you, and we will begin from a tabletop position. What normally happens when we do this incorrectly is that the hands get a little loose here. So I don't have the hands pushed firmly down into the ground. The palm is up away from the floor. I'm actually weight bearing into the wrist. Then I lift up and I straighten the legs immediately. And you can see that my weight is mostly over the hands. If I look up a little bit, I'm cranking on my neck. And this is that miserable position that I was talking to you about. And the reason I've gotten into this is because I've insisted on having my legs straight when maybe they shouldn't be. So that is kind of what that position looks like. And as you can see, that's a really difficult position to be able to hold for any length of time because I'm not using my core strength at all to help me in that pose. For example, if I come into plank pose, I can hold this for a little while because I'm using my glutes, my abs, my quad muscles, all the muscles in the center of the body to help me hold that position. But when I'm in that incorrect downward facing dog with my weight forward over the hands, then my core is not being activated to help me. Okay, so let's fix that. The way we're going to fix it is all about the knees. So if I come into this start position, now I'm going to grip the floor strong with my hands, make sure that my hands are ready to support my weight, curl the toes under. I'm going to lift up into downward dog with bent knees. Now I have the ability to push my weight back toward the legs. You can see that there's much less of an angle in my wrist. This is much easier for the hands, the wrist, the forearms, and I've got much more of my weight into my legs where I have stronger, bigger muscles. Now I'm in this position and I can start to slowly straighten into the legs a little bit, but what typically happens here is I straighten the legs and I go right back to this incorrect position. So I'm going to bend the knees, relax the head, and then push my weight back toward my legs, lengthening through my arms. Now, if you want a little bit more, you could try straightening into the legs a little bit, but notice that I'm not shifting my weight forward into my hands. So that is the correction. There is nothing that says that your legs have to be straight in downward facing dog. In fact, what we need to understand is that if your hamstrings are a little shorter, a little tighter, then your downward facing dog is going to have bent knees because that's just the way your body is built. So your straight might have your knees a little bit bent. That is perfectly okay. So again, if I come into this, strong hands, lift up with knees bent, push my weight back, and then straighten into my legs until I start to get a really great stretch, again, without shifting my weight forward into my hands. Now, that part that I mentioned about a little bit of unconventional thinking about coming into downward facing dog and holding it, I recommend that no matter your level, you come into your downward facing dog with your knees bent, and then you can move them toward straight. So for some folks, if you are a little more flexible, you're going to come up into your downward dog. The knees are bent. You push back. Now I've got really good form here. If I have the ability to straighten into the legs, for some folks, you might get the legs all the way straight, and that's fine. Notice I have not shifted my weight forward into my hands. Now I'm feeling a really deep stretch here, but I've really gotten myself into a nice position. So for some folks, yes, you might have your legs straight. Others of you, the knees are going to be a little bit bent. So if you're that person where the knees need to be a little bit bent, you might be interested in doing some stretching for your hamstrings to be able to get your body into that position just a little bit better. The best way to do that is simply to do your downward facing dog and work on gently pushing your weight back into your legs. But there's another way you can stretch your hamstrings, and let's do that. I'm going to show you from standing how to do that stretch, okay? All right, so from standing position, we can really stretch the hamstrings very nicely. And the way we're going to do that, I'll come into this angle here. We're going to take the legs out wide into a fairly wide straddle position. And then I want to get myself lengthened up and tall as I possibly can. Pull the belly in tight so the core is engaged, hands onto the hips. I'm going to stretch and get nice and tall. And then typically what will happen here is we'll bend the knees, round the spine, drop the head down. And I'm really not feeling much of a stretch here at all. So instead, I'm going to, again, keep the belly pulled in, lengthen the spine. I'm simply going to let the hips push back. My back stays straight, and I'm going to come down until I feel the stretch. Now, my knees might have a little bend in them, or they might be pretty straight. Either way is okay, as long as you're feeling the stretch, and I'm going to come back up. So I'm just going to flow through this. Core engaged, hinge at the hips, legs straight, or maybe knees a little bit bent, and come back up. You can do this move several times, and each time you do it, you'll feel that you get just a little more stretch in those hamstrings by moving through this dynamically. You can do that as many times as you like, or you can hold the position, belly pulled in tight. You can come down here and hold this for 30 seconds or so. And again, knees can be a little bit bent if you need that, core engaged, and come back up as soon as you're ready. If you do that consistently, you are going to find that those hamstrings start to lengthen a little bit. That will make that downward facing dog a little bit easier. All right, if you have any comments, questions, please leave them in the comment section below. Happy to answer any questions you might have, and good luck with your downward facing dog.